The custodian's truth. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the corridor of Riverside Academy as Elena Vasquez pushed her cleaning cart down the polished linoleum floor. At 64, she had been maintaining these halls for nearly 2 decades. Her weathered hands steady on the mop handle, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. The students knew her smile. The teachers respected her quiet efficiency, but none of them knew the secrets she carried from a life she'd fought hard to leave behind. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Vincent Romano strutted down the hallway, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor with each arrogant step. The new literature teacher had arrived 3 months ago with impressive credentials and family connections that had fast-tracked his hiring. His dark hair was slicked back, his suits perfectly tailored, and his attitude toward the staff ranged from dismissive to openly hostile. "Watch where you're going with that bucket," Vincent snapped as Elena moved her supplies aside to let him pass. "Some of us have real work to do here." Elena kept her eyes down, continuing her methodical cleaning. She'd learned long ago that confrontation rarely led anywhere good, especially when you were the help. But Vincent wasn't finished. "You know, I've been thinking," he said, loud enough for the gathering students to hear. "Maybe it's time this school hired some younger custodial staff, people who can actually keep up with the demands of a quality institution." The teenagers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the cruelty in his words. Elena's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she said nothing. Vincent's lips curled into a satisfied smirk as he continued down the hall, leaving behind a wake of uncomfortable silence. What Vincent didn't know was that Elena Vasquez had once been Elena Castellano, bookkeeper for one of the most dangerous crime families on the East Coast. For 15 years, she had managed their finances, laundered their money, and kept meticulous records of every illegal transaction. She had been good at it. Too good. And when she finally found the courage to walk away, she had taken nothing with her except the knowledge that could destroy them all. That knowledge now included intimate familiarity with the Romano family operations, including Vincent's Uncle Sal, who had been her direct supervisor during those dark years. The same Sal Romano whose nephew now terrorized students and staff at Riverside Academy, using his position to recruit vulnerable kids into the family business. Elena had noticed the signs weeks ago. Certain students, always the ones from struggling families, always the ones with few options, would disappear from their after-school activities. They would return looking nervous, carrying expensive items they couldn't afford, speaking in hushed tones about opportunities and quick money. Her nephew Miguel was one of them. Miguel Vasquez was 17, a bright kid who dreamed of college despite his family's financial struggles. His mother worked double shifts at the hospital. His father had died when Miguel was 12, and Elena had become like a second parent to him. She had worked extra hours, saved every penny, determined to give him the chances she never had. But Vincent Romano had other plans. "Meet me after basketball practice," Vincent had told Miguel the previous Friday, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "There's something we need to discuss about your future here." Miguel had been confused but compliant. Teachers didn't usually take such personal interest in students, especially students like him. But when he arrived at the empty classroom, Vincent's demeanor had shifted entirely. "Sit down, kid," Vincent had said, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk about opportunities." He had slid a manila envelope across the desk. Inside were photographs. Miguel with his friends, his mother leaving work, Elena cleaning the school halls. The message was clear without being spoken. "There's a package that needs to be delivered," Vincent had continued, his voice smooth as silk. "Simple job. You take it from point A to point B. $500 cash. No questions asked." Miguel's hands had trembled as he looked at the photos. "I don't understand." "What kind of package?" "The kind you don't ask questions about," Vincent had replied. "The kind that keeps your family safe and your future secure." "You want to go to college, right? These kinds of opportunities don't come along every day. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Miguel had taken the envelope, his heart pounding, knowing he was crossing a line he could never uncross. When he told Elena that night, breaking down in her small kitchen as she made dinner, she felt the familiar chill of recognition. The same fear she had lived with for years, the same impossible choices, the same web of corruption and intimidation. "He showed me pictures, Tia," Miguel whispered, using the Spanish word for aunt that had been his name for her since childhood. "Pictures of you, of Mama." He said this was just the beginning, that there would be more opportunities if I proved myself. Eleanor's hands stilled on the cutting board. She knew exactly what Vincent Romano was doing because she had watched Sal Romano do the same thing hundreds of times: find a vulnerable target, apply pressure, create dependency, and before they knew it, they were in too deep to escape. But Elena also knew something Vincent didn't expect. She knew how their operation worked from the inside. And after 20 years of clean living, of building a new life through honest work and quiet dignity, she was not going to let them destroy her nephew. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at school earlier than usual. She needed to think, to plan, to figure out how to protect Miguel without destroying herself in the process. As she unlocked the custodial closet, she heard voices coming from Vincent's classroom. "The package goes to the warehouse on 5th Street, Vincent was saying. "You hand it directly to Tony Marchetti. Nobody else. You don't look inside, you don't ask questions, and you definitely don't tell anyone about this conversation." Elena recognized the second voice as Marcus Thompson, a senior who had been acting strangely for weeks. Another recruit, another kid being pulled into the Romano family web. "What if I get caught?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with fear. "You won't get caught if you follow instructions," Vincent replied. "But if you do something stupid, if you try to back out or cause problems, well, let's just say my family doesn't appreciate disloyalty." Eleanor moved closer to the door, her cleaning supplies providing perfect cover. Through the crack, she could see Vincent pulling out a small recording device and setting it on his desk. "Read this script into the recorder," he instructed Marcus. "Insurance policy, just in case you get any ideas about changing your mind." Elena's blood ran cold as she heard Marcus's trembling voice reciting words that would implicate him in money laundering and drug distribution. The same tactics Sal Romano had used on her decades ago: create evidence that could be used against someone if they ever tried to leave or testify. That afternoon, Elena made a decision that would change everything. She waited until the school was nearly empty, then made her way to Vincent's classroom. He was grading papers, looking every inch the respectable educator. "Mr. Romano," she said quietly from the doorway. "May I have a word?" Vincent looked up, irritation flashing across his features. "What is it?" "I'm busy." Elena stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "It's about Miguel Vasquez." "Who?" Vincent's expression didn't change, but Elena caught the slight tension in his shoulders. "My nephew," she said simply. "The boy you've been recruiting." Now Vincent's attention was fully focused. He set down his pen, leaning back in his chair with calculated casualness. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Of course you do," Elena replied, moving closer to his desk. "Just like you recruited Marcus Thompson and Sarah Chen before him. Just like your Uncle Sal recruited me 25 years ago." The color drained from Vincent's face. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely surprised. "That's right," Elena continued, her voice steady and calm. "Elena Castellano. I kept your family's books from 1998 to 2013. I know exactly how this works because I helped design the system." Vincent's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. "That's impossible." Elena Castellano disappeared. The family looked for her for years. The family stopped looking when they assumed I was dead, Elena corrected. It was easier for everyone that way. I changed my name, moved across the country, started over. But I never forgot the ledgers, Vincent. I never forgot the account numbers, the shell companies, the money trails. All of it. You're bluffing, Vincent said, but his voice lacked conviction. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook. She flipped it open and began reciting numbers, account numbers, transfer codes, amounts and dates that made Vincent's eyes widen with recognition. Cayman Island Trust, account ending in 7742, she continued. Monthly transfers of $200,000 through Sunset Holdings LLC, your uncle's personal account, the one he thinks nobody else knows about. Vincent stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. What do you want? I want you to leave my nephew alone, Elena said simply. I want you to stop recruiting children. And I want you to understand that if anything happens to Miguel, to me, or to any of the kids you've been targeting, every piece of information I have goes straight to the FBI. You wouldn't dare, Vincent snarled. You'd be implicating yourself. They'd arrest you too. Elena smiled sadly. Vincent, I'm 64 years old. I've been carrying this weight for decades. If going to prison is the price for protecting these kids, I'll pay it gladly. The two stared at each other across the classroom, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows between them. Finally, Vincent spoke. You have no proof of what I'm doing here. Don't I? Eleanor pulled out her phone and played a recording. Vincent's own voice instructing Marcus Thompson about the package delivery, the threats, the forced confession. Amazing what you can hear when you're just the invisible cleaning lady. Vincent's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, calculation, and finally a cold smile that reminded Elena uncomfortably of his uncle. Even if you have recordings, even if you know about the old operations, you can't touch me, he said. I have protections you don't understand, people in high places, and if you try to expose me, I promise you that Miguel will pay the price. Elena nodded as if she had expected this response. I thought you might say that. She walked to the classroom door and opened it. In the hallway stood Principal Janet Morrison, Detective Ray Santos from the City Police, and Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Gentlemen, Agent Chen, Eleanor said politely. I believe you heard enough? Detective Santos stepped into the room, his hand resting on his handcuffs. Vincent Romano, you're under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, money laundering, and corruption of minors. As the detective read Vincent his rights, Agent Chen approached Elena. Ms. Vasquez, or should I say Ms. Castellano, we're going to need you to come with us for debriefing. Elena nodded, unsurprised. I understand. But first, can someone make sure Miguel gets home safely and that the other students know they don't have to be afraid anymore? Principal Morrison stepped forward. Elena, I had no idea about your past, but what you did today, you saved these kids. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. As Elena walked down the hallway between Agent Chen and Detective Santos, she passed her cleaning cart still sitting where she left it hours earlier. The floors would go unmopped tonight, but for the first time in decades, Elena Vasquez felt truly clean. The next morning, news of Vincent Romano's arrest spread quickly through Riverside Academy. Students whispered in the hallways about the teacher who had been leading a double life, recruiting them for his family's criminal organization. But they also whispered about Elena, the quiet custodian who had risked everything to protect them. Miguel found Elena in the school office, where she was completing paperwork with federal agents. Her eyes were tired but peaceful, and when she saw him, she smiled. Are you in trouble, Tia? He asked quietly. Some, Eleanor admitted, but not the kind that matters. Not anymore. Agent Chen looked up from her notes. Ms. Castellano Vasquez has agreed to full cooperation with our investigation. Given her voluntary disclosure and the circumstances, we're recommending immunity in exchange for her testimony. Elena squeezed Miguel's hand. It means I might have to go away for a while to testify and help with the investigation, but you'll be safe. All of you will be safe. What about your job? Miguel asked. Principal Morrison, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. Elena, when this is all over, when you're ready, you'll always have a place here. What you did, what you sacrificed, this school owes you more than we can ever repay. 3 months later, Elena testified before a federal grand jury in the largest organized crime prosecution in the state's history. Her testimony, combined with the evidence she had preserved from her years with the Castellano family, led to the indictment of 47 individuals, including Sal Romano and 6 other high-ranking crime family members. Vincent Romano pleaded guilty to multiple charges and received a 15-year sentence. In his plea agreement, he provided information about other family operations, hoping to reduce his time. But the damage was done. The Romano family's carefully constructed empire began to crumble. Elena served no jail time. Her cooperation, the years she had spent building a legitimate life, and the courage she had shown in protecting the students all weighed in her favor. She returned to Riverside Academy 6 months after Vincent's arrest, resuming her duties as head custodian. But something had changed. Students no longer looked past her as she cleaned their classrooms. Teachers stopped to chat with her in the hallways, and when new staff members joined the school, they quickly learned that Elena Vasquez was more than just the person who kept their building clean. She was the woman who had stood up to organized crime to protect their students. Miguel graduated valedictorian and received a full scholarship to study criminal justice. In his graduation speech, he spoke about courage, about the people who protect others without seeking recognition, about second chances and the power of truth. As Elena listened from the audience, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She had spent 15 years helping criminals hide their crimes, and 20 years trying to atone for that choice. But in the end, it was the very knowledge that had once made her complicit that allowed her to protect the innocent. The school board commissioned a small plaque that hung outside the main office, in recognition of Elena Vasquez, whose courage and sacrifice exemplify the highest ideals of the Riverside Academy community. Elena protested the recognition, insisting she had only done what was necessary. But as she pushed her cart down the familiar hallways each morning, greeting students by name, ensuring their learning environment remained safe and clean, she knew that her past no longer defined her. She had chosen redemption over comfort, truth over safety, and in making that choice, she had found peace. The fluorescent lights still hummed overhead. The linoleum still needed daily cleaning, and Elena Vasquez still arrived early and stayed late to make sure everything was perfect for the students of Riverside Academy. But now, when she looked in the mirror each morning, she saw not Elena Castellano, the criminal bookkeeper, but Elena Vasquez, the protector, the woman who had faced her demons and won. And in the quiet satisfaction of honest work, in the grateful smiles of students she had saved, in the knowledge that sometimes the most important battles are fought by the most unlikely heroes, Elena had found something she had never expected: forgiveness, both from others and from herself. The halls of Riverside Academy continued to echo with the sounds of learning, growing, and hope. And in those echoes, Elena heard the voice of redemption, clear and strong, reminding her that it's never too late to choose courage over fear, truth over silence, and love over indifference. Her mop moved steadily across the floor, erasing the day's scuffs and stains, preparing the space for tomorrow's possibilities. And in that simple, honest work, Elena Vasquez had found her peace.